Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Reginald Joe Abernethy, James Carroll Ackerman, Jr., Donald Ray Alexander, Miguel Angel Cruz Alicea, Richard Wilbur Anderson, Charles C. Anderson, Jr., Alan Wayne Andrews, Walter Harold Onslow, Alan H. Archer, Kenneth Dean Bailey, Kenneth Earl Baker, Jr., Larry Dean Baldwin, Roscoe Willett Ball, Jr., John Barca, Jr., Floyd Barker, Jr., Gary Lane Barnum, Morris Sampson Beeson, Jerry Lee Bell, Robert Lee Bellamy, Ralph Nevin Bickford, James Everett Blau, Armin Joachim Blake, Clarence Henry Bullen, Francis Michael Boyle, John Ralph Brandberg, Kenneth Wayne Brenwall, Dennis Ray Bruce, Tony Lee Buholtz, William Irvin Burke III, Paul William Bush, Albert Charles Butler, Philip J. Caford, Jr., Reginald David Cleave, Willis Cormier, Richard Paul Cox, James Andrew Cunningham, Johnny M. Curley, Christopher Zeno Charnota, Charles E. Daniels, Carlos Ray Davis, Thomas Allen Delaney, Michael Julian Delgado, Jr., Blair Edward Dennis, David Wayne Derry, Edward DeVincent, Jr., Carl Lawrence DiNunzio, Jr., Terry Wayne Doan, Charles Mack Douglas, Paul Robert Drummond, Carl Walter Druzinski, Benjamin Wayne Duncan, Jesse George Eastman, Walter Jacob Edgar, Harvey Gordon Enns, Frank Ryan Esch, James Larry Evans, Arnold Joe Faulkner, William Henry Fells, Charles Eugene Fletcher, Thomas Folden, Joseph David Francolini, Fred C. H. Frappia, Jr., Wardle Gaines, William Stewart Glenn,
Richard Walter Godin, Eduardo Gonzalez Dross, Larry Jack Gotcher, Donald Terry Graham, Frank Granato, Bill Wayne Grant, Ralph Gray, Donald Edward Green, Walter Green Jr., Jimmy Richard Griffin, Michael Brian Grimes, John Joseph Groman, Stephen Douglas Gukowski, Charles Larry Guthrie, Charles Harry Haber Jr., Walter Ray Hall, Jeffrey Giles Hamilton, Early C. Hamilton Jr., Michael Leo Harris, Noel Austin Harris Jr., Charles Francis Harrison, Michael James Hatfield, David Roy Hayward, Michael Edward Hermson, Frederick Y. Holges, Kermit W. Holland, Jr., Stephen Dale Hooper, Jacob Andrew Horn, Andrew Horvath, Billy Howard, Charles Dennis Howell, Danny Eugene Hubbs, Joseph Daniel Herda, Robert Patrick Ilsley, Robert Donald Jenkins, Benjamin Allen Jones, Kenneth Russell Joyner, Richard Dennis Kaminsky, William Thomas Coffer, Roger Presborn Keller, Donald Paul Knutson, Eugene John George Koch, Manfred Walter Krauss, Gary Melville Ladd, Bruce Randolph Landis, Jr., Larry Duane Lehman, Robert Norman LeBrun, Jerry Duane Lee, Marion Leonard Lee, Jr., Jerome Edward Leroy, Michael Edwin Linderman, Charlie Matthew Logan, Robert Luna, Donovan Lauren Lyon, Carl Lyons, Calvin Dwight Mayberry, Julius Maddox, Ralph Warren Maney, Linwood Dwight Martin, Robert L. Matthews, Robert Eugene McCafferty, Gilbert Ellis McDaniel, Theodore Valenti McInnes, James Allen McKechnie,
John Wilson McLemore, Jr., Jerry Monroe McWhorter, Albert Manuel Mendoza, Raul Montez, Galen Leroy Moore, Peter Gibney Moriarty, John Arthur Mott, Timothy Xavier Murphy, Thomas J. Murray, William Joseph O'Brien, Roger Thomas Okamoto, David Dennis Ouellette, David Emmanuel Ovist, Richard Patterson, Stephen Craig Patterson, Brian Scott Perlowitz, Lovie Paul Philip Peters, Joseph Robert Piambino, Jerry Lee Pickworth, Erhard Hans Conrad Pohl, Dennis Albert Prentice, Thomas John Patak, Charles Richard Pyle, Paul Eugene Ream, Billy Elwood Register, Angel Reyes, Leonardo Rios Velasquez, Jr., Larry Michael Roberson, John Chester Robertson, George Bernard Rusnak, Richard Frank Salazar, John Wilbur Sams, Jr., William D. Sands III, Calvin Elliott Schwartz, Richard Samuel Seddes, Thomas Eric Shannon, Stephen Craig Shannon, Benny Joe Sisson, Lawrence Leon Smith, Frank Spires, Roger William Stahl, Terry Laverne Stamen, Thomas John Sturgill, Clarence Myron Souchon, Clyde Stanley Sweat, Clifford Lee Swisher, Moises Tapia, Daniel Morris Taylor, Robert Charles Tedford, Jose Benigno Tiarina, Thomas Norman Tolson, Esteban Torres, John Grove Traver III, David Clark Valance, David Vasquez, John Curtis Wells, Ralph Michael Wenzel, Frederick George Wheeler, Gary Sidney White, Lynn Cecil Whitford, Junior Wilkerson, C. W. Richard Williams, Raymond Wesley Wilson, Billy Joe Witzkowski, Fred Ewell Wright, Jr., James David Wright, Jr., Thomas Lee Ziegler, John Zupan,